Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Epstein, and I am with SamTrans. Very happy to welcome you here to our first Reimagine SamTrans virtual community meeting. You'll notice a couple of things. As we said before, we have interpretation going on. Please be sure to click that the icon, the interpretation icon, and go to your channel, including English. So everyone should have an icon right now that has a language underneath. So the way we're going to do this presentation tonight, we're going to do a number of slides with a bunch of information about the project. And then we will be taking questions at the end in two different ways. You can either put them directly into the chat and we'll record those, ask the questions after the presentation is over. We'll also be taking people off mute at the end if you'd rather ask your question verbally. You also will see that we do have I'm entirely blanking on what the script on the bottom, closed caption, that's the word, closed caption going on at the bottom of the screen. I think you saw from before, it doesn't work so well when people are speaking in other languages, but it should help for the English language. And with that little introduction, I'm going to turn this over to Jonathan to talk to you about our very exciting project.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Let me work on getting my video up here. There we go. All right, thank you everyone for coming again. It is my pleasure to be here to present Reimagine SamTrans, the alternatives, specifically the Mid-County. So this evening, quick agenda to go over. We'll go over the project goals and timelines of Reimagine. We'll introduce the alternatives, specifically a summary of the Mid-County changes. And then we'll go over how you can participate, and we highly encourage it, and give us feedback. And then we'll have some time for questions and discussion. So in talking about our goals of the Reimagine SamTrans, we really want to improve the experience for our existing SamTrans customers. Along with those existing SamTrans customers that we want to have ride more often, we also want new riders to come and join us on the bus. And we also want to build efficiency and effectiveness as a mobility provider, meaning that we're putting the resources that we have in the places where they're needed. Of course, during this time, we also have to think about how the pandemic has affected Reimagine SamTrans and really everything in our lives. But we recognize that Reimagine SamTrans is more important than ever to improve the experience for our customers. When we look at growing the ridership and using the bus more frequently, we recognize that there's some uncertainty right now in how our landscape's going to look as far as where people are going to work and how they're going to get there. So we will work to adapt as best as possible. And then we also recognize that it's more important than ever to have our resources where they need to be. So going over the project timeline, the project actually started in the summer of 2019, and we did a round of public outreach where we talked to folks about what they felt was going really well with SamTrans, what wasn't going well, and where the needs were. And from that, we started to look at designing new proposals for service. Now, then COVID hit, and we had to take some immediate plans. So we were put on pause for a little while, but we're back. This is going a second round of public outreach where we took all that information from the first round and now have created these alternatives as discussion points. After this, we will put all these alternatives together into a preferred alternative and then have another round of public outreach, present that alternative to our board of directors, and begin implementation in the summer of 2022. So again, talking about informing the alternatives, what went into creating these alternatives that we'll share with you this evening? We had the existing conditions of the SamTrans bus network. We had the public outreach, and we also did a lot of market research. And all three of those went into forming these alternatives. So let's go into those alternatives. Before we dive too deep in, we want to talk about our guiding principles and what we thought about as we were forming the alternatives. Customer focus, by far, very, very important to us, making sure that we are listening to the customer and we're giving the residents of San Mateo County what they need in a transportation provider. At the same time, we want to work really closely with our operators and the folks that put the service out each and every day. We want to design a system of high caliber that's deliverable by them. We want to be an effective mobility provider, which means that we want the buses and the routes to work for people and be a true transportation system, not just put a bus out there for the sake of putting a bus out there. And of course, with everything that we do, we want to make sure that we look through a social equity lens and we provide transportation services in an equitable manner. So across all three objectives that I'm going to share, there's some common pieces that we wanted to make sure to hit regardless of which alternative we were looking at. Scheduling, we want to make sure that we're efficient and we're using those resources to a maximum. We want to make sure that we're reliable. If we say the bus is going to be there, it's going to be there at that time. Again, equity, making sure that we improve service in high need areas. We want to increase our connections to other agencies in the area, BART, Muni, VTA, Caltrain. And then we also want to, again, be efficient in our resources, making sure that we're maximizing what we have and it's put to the best possible use. And finally, less duplication. We don't want to have two buses in the same area where one would suffice and we could put those resources elsewhere. So as I said, we came up with three alternatives and the alternatives have themes. So alternative one really emphasizes direct high frequency access to places in the county. Alternative two focuses on improved connections to other transit agencies like Muni, BART, Caltrain, VTA. And alternative three retains geographic coverage, service within the county. So it has the most spread, if you will, of bus service across the entire county. Diving a little bit deeper into the alternatives, alternative one, again, direct and high frequency, has some trade-offs, right? There's always trade-offs in everything that we do. So there would be a modest reduction in the school-related service that we provide. Local service would, again, also have a modest reduction, but we would have an increase in the frequency of service and really neutral in the express services that we offer. What does that mean? Kind of overall changes. 7 routes would get service every 15 minutes all day, 7 days a week. We'd have service to Oyster Point from Daly City, South San Francisco, San Bruno. East Palo Alto would have a limited stop route that goes to SFO through San Bruno, BART. All the services into downtown San Francisco would be truncated at the county line. We would connect with Muni and other transportation agencies, but we wouldn't continue into downtown San Francisco. Routes 292 and ECR would be split into 2 routes to improve reliability and increase frequency in the busiest areas. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into the ECR a little bit later. And then areas with low ridership would be targeted for service reductions. And you can see here a map. This is also available on our website, showing how the routes would change. The system map would change under this alternative. Talking about alternative 2, so this is the expanded connections to rail and the other transportation providers in the region. Again, school-related services would have a modest reduction. Local services would increase, have a significant increase. Frequent service would remain neutral, so we wouldn't really have any more frequent service across the system, but we would have more express service. And so what does that all mean? We would expand service to Tacoma BART, Millbury BART, Caltrain, Hillsdale Caltrain Station, and the Redwood City Caltrain Station. We'd have 2 new routes that go into Oyster Point. We would expand service to community colleges. And in this scenario, we would have 3 different routes that go into San Francisco. We'd have the 292, the Foster City Express, and a new express bus from San Mateo into San Francisco. And again, under this alternative, areas with low ridership would be targeted for service reductions. And again, here's a map, again, available on the website, showing how the 2 different systems would look. Alternative 3, which is our retaining geographic coverage, so the most coverage of the county. School-related services would have a modest reduction. Local service would have an increase. The frequency, again, would remain neutral, and we would have a reduction in that express service. So under this alternative, 11 routes would have better midday and weekend service. We'd have better connections between East Palo Alto, East Palo Alto to Stanford, and Daly City and SFO. We would introduce microtransit zones in East Palo Alto, Foster City, Millbury, and mid-coast by Half Moon Bay. We'd fully restore the Foster City Express. And overall, it would mean fewer transfers and more one-seat rides to key destinations in the county. And here's the map of our existing and how alternative 3 would look. So how do the alternatives compare, right? There's pluses and minuses to every choice that we have, right, in life. And that's true of our alternatives as well. And so we've outlaid how the alternatives really address some of the things that we heard from customer focus. More frequent service was definitely heard, more weekend and midday service. So this really compares all the alternatives. And on this point, I really like to point out, we have 3 alternatives that we're discussing. But at the end of the day, it is probably not going to be any one of these alternatives that becomes the new SamTrans bus system. It's going to be a combination after we have a conversation and get feedback from the public on what the preferred alternative is really going to look like. And so, it's important to remember nothing is set in stone, and we really appreciate you coming and having this outreach with us because that will help guide us to what that preferred alternative will be. So now let's go a little bit deeper into the mid-county summary. Under alternative 1, Route 294 would have more direct and frequent midday and weekday service. We'd have that new limited express route from East Palo Alto to Redwood City, SFO, and San Bruno BART. Foster City would have increase in frequency of one of the routes, and we would have reduced service and stops on the Foster City Express, the 256, 260, 295, and 398. Under alternative 2 in the mid-county, we would have a new route, the Route 249, connecting San Mateo and the College of San Mateo. We'd have the Route 294 that would be more direct, and introduction of those 3 commuter regional routes, including the East Palo Alto Express that we talked about going to Redwood City, SFO, and San Bruno, the Foster City Express, which goes from Foster City to San Francisco, and the San Mateo Express, or SMX, going from San Mateo Park Ride to San Francisco. Foster City would have 2 routes, which would operate more frequently. And routes with a reduced service or stops would include Route 260, 295, and 398. Under alternative 3, which is the geographic coverage, we would have a new route, the 291, which would connect San Carlos and Redwood City. The Foster City Express would be fully restored. Foster City has one local route, which would operate more frequently and in Foster City, we'd have a new on-demand service zone. We'd expand service on Sundays for routes 256, 291, 295. And then routes with reduced service or stops include the 260 and 295. So now let's go even deeper and talk about the ECR. So the ECR being our longest route and definitely one of the, if not the most popular route, has some changes under alternative 1. It's proposed that the route be split into 2 with an ECR North and an ECR South, and the split would occur at the Millbury Transit Center. The northern portion, the ECR North, would operate every 10 minutes on weekdays and every 15 minutes on weekends. The southern portion of the route, ECR South, would operate every 15 minutes, 7 days a week. We would look to streamline the route in Daly City by using Florney Street. And under this alternative, we'd also reintroduce ECR Rapid between Redwood City and San Bruno BART. The ECR under alternative 2 would reduce the number of stops on the route to increase the speed and reliability. So up to 30% of the stops along the route would be consolidated to reduce the travel times between Daly City and Palo Alto by 10 to 15 minutes during peak times. And this means that about 13% of our riders would need to walk a little bit further to get to a stop if their stop was consolidated. But all riders would get that 10 to 15 minute travel time increase. And under this alternative as well, we'd streamline the route using Florney Street in Daly City. Under alternative 3 for the ECR, we would keep the same hours in service. The frequency wouldn't change. We would still streamline the route in Daly City by using Florney Street. And we would reschedule the route to reflect better the travel time. So that's something that we're constantly doing, but it'd be an overhaul to make sure that our time points and the way that the bus is performing on the route works well with the current traffic conditions. So now let's talk about public input and how you can participate and make the system great. So we're taking public input for these alternatives through May 31st. And there's several different ways that you can participate. We have a website dedicated to the project at www.reimaginesamtrans.com. There you can review all the route alternatives and take a survey. There's a lot of details on there. Pages for each of the routes that are proposed to change under each of the alternatives. You can talk to staff during a live social media event or a virtual Q&A session. We have SamChat this Friday, which is going to be fantastic. We'll be diving into the ECR. I'll be there, and Michelle from my team. So that's a lot of fun, and I encourage you to join that. We also will have some virtual Q&A sessions over Zoom, and then meetings with stakeholder groups across the county. And we have the limited in-person pop-ups across the county that we'll be doing. And you can check and see all of these different events on the calendar at reimaginesamtrans.com. Of course, you're already doing this, but you could attend another virtual public meeting. We've spaced them out to be across regions in the county. So tonight you're at the Mid-County meeting. We also have a Coastside meeting on May 5th, a South County on May 12th, a North County on May 18th. And we have there listed as well the languages that will be available for those meetings. And you can also get the schedule at reimaginesamtrans.com. We'll talk, we also have, so the survey that we talked about is at reimaginesamtrans.com/alternatives. And there you can take a survey, give us the feedback. about the alternatives, what you like, what you don't like. Keep in mind here that none of them are set in stone, so feel free to tell us that you like the changes proposed to the ECR in scenario alternative one, but you really like how the 292 is proposed in alternative three. That's okay. Giving that feedback is really important to us, and it really helps guide us. So I will say thank you in advance for taking that survey. So here we are again talking about the public outreach, just revisiting the timeline. When this public outreach is done and we've all taken the survey and all that input is given, we'll take it back and again make that preferred alternative based on the feedback that we got. And then from there, we will design this preferred alternative, again, come out to the public, talk to everyone about it, get comments, and then propose it to our board of directors, who will hopefully approve it. And then we will begin implementation in the summer of 2022. So with that, I am going to ask if anybody has any questions or comments, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Great, everyone. Thank you, Jonathan. Why don't you go ahead? You can unshare your screen for this part. But again, if you have a question that's relevant to one of the maps, we can pull that back up. So we've gotten a bunch of questions in the chat. We're going to go through those. But also, if you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand. If you're calling in, that's *9, and we will unmute you. But why don't we give this a start? And I'm just going to say again, I know Jonathan said it already, we can't ask you to take our survey enough. It is critical. We love these comments here. We are recording them. They all count. They all matter. I'm talking too fast for the interpreters. I do that. So I'm going to slow down a little bit, but reimaginesamtrans.com/alternatives. We have every route in the system, every alternative. It's really a great place for you to weigh in. All right, and so with that, we're going to start with our first question, which starts out, thank you, Jonathan. In regards of focusing on the customers having a reimaginable riding experience, are you planning to make more proper bus shelters? It would be great to add bus stop shelters on the alternatives. Thank you. And that comes from Hermes Monzon.
Well, thank you for the thank you. Yeah, so absolutely with bus shelters, I think that's an ongoing project for us as SamTrans. And while Reimagine really focuses on the route design, it doesn't mean that the team and the extended team at SamTrans isn't focusing on bus shelters. So I think that there'll be some things coming out about bus shelters, and we always work to have improvements there. Jessica, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but
no, I mean,
looking forward to that.
We understand the shelters are really important to the community, and they're how people see us. So we've been doing a lot of internal conversations, and I think we're going to really work at what is the best and most equitable way to distribute shelters around the county. It's not part of Reimagine SamTrans. This project is really about the bus system and the bus routing, but we are very aware of it as an agency, and we're definitely going to be working on that. All right, the next question, can you explain about how microtransit works? And that comes from Iris.
Yeah, absolutely. I was happy to explain that. So microtransit is it's really a transportation or mobility solution that is put into place maybe in areas where a traditional fixed route just wouldn't work. There's not enough demand down a certain corridor, but there's people that still need those rides. And so it's an on-demand solution, meaning that it would have a program like an app where you would request a ride, and it may have a specific place around you that you go get picked up, and then a specific place like BART station or Caltrain station where you get dropped off. But it's not as constrained as a fixed route or a bus where it just goes along a route and has time. You would request it, it'd give you a time that it says they'll be available when it'll get you to that drop off.
And I think one thing really important to note, if we do a microtransit system, you don't just You don't just have to book it through an app. Our customer service department, people can phone the customer service department. We have over 200 different languages that we can interpret through. So if you don't have a smartphone, you can still absolutely use microtransit. It's like Uber, that's a bus, and you just pay your regular bus fare. All right, so for the next question, we've got a raise hand from Drew. Hi, Drew. I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello there, good evening. It's more of a comment than a question per se. It's about Foster City Express. I did ride this route, and I think I would argue that just how it's presented needs to be slightly modified. The symbol FCX is fine, and even calling it Foster City Express at the high level is fine. But the express service actually also serves a part of Eastern San Mateo. It might call it the shoreline of San Mateo. I'm not sure how you want to describe it. And I think it it constantly gets talked about the Foster City Express, and it should be like the Foster City Express, and then maybe in parentheses or something like Eastern San Mateo. Because when I wrote it, about a third of the people came from the city of San Mateo, and I would have never thought that had I just read the literature and stuff. And the route, I think, like especially like right around North Fork, when you get like right before getting onto 101 or getting off 101, it's a great route to get into the city. Like for anyone in the city of San Mateo, that's all in that general area. So I just think that how this is presented just needs to be tweaked a little bit, just to capture that, because that's I believe a significant share of the riders are city of San Mateo residents. And it's a great route though, all in all. So thank you.
Drew, thank you for that comment. That's really, we will definitely look at all of our marketing and branding and really how we talk about our routes. So Drew, I'm going to go ahead and mute you, and then we're going to do another one or two off the chat, and then we'll come back to the next raised hand. All right, so Sarah Funes has asked, why is the cutoff Millbrae alternative to ECR?
Yeah, so I'll say first, nothing is set in stone. It could be somewhere other than Millbrae. But when we're looking at ridership trends and where folks are going, Millbrae appears to be a pretty good location to split the route in half, meaning that most people south of Millbrae stay south of Millbrae, and most people north of Millbrae Station stay north. Doesn't mean that it'll work perfectly for everyone. We recognize that there'll probably need to be some transfers, but we also have recommended that rapid service on the ECR. So that should help with some of that flowing around Millbrae. But yeah, it doesn't have to be there, and definitely interested in what folks think and if they think that somewhere else would be better. And I will add that it's a good connection point to both BART and Caltrain, which makes it attractive as well.
All right, so our next question is coming in from PM Chuang. Can you report briefly how COVID changed SamTrans ridership and finances?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to dive into the finances. That's a little bit out of my realm, but maybe we have somebody that can talk about that. I know I can share with you what I've heard, which is overall we are healthy. And so that is good. As far as ridership, we're down about 60% of our ridership pre-pandemic, and it's slowly coming back to those levels. So, we saw a huge drop in ridership at the start of the shelter in place in March of 20. But every month we're seeing ridership come back, and we're definitely tracking it on a route by route level to try to make sure that we're getting the service that needs to be out there. So it's a constantly shifting landscape, and it's been, I'll say, an interesting process to go through on the planning side, but hopefully folks are getting what they need. We really have tried to take a lot of focus on that.
Great. All right. Thanks, Jonathan. Let's see. What else? Do we have anyone raise hand? We don't. Okay. I'm going to go back to the chat. Jonathan, I think you might have a message in group conversation. Hi, Hermes. All right. Question from LC. Can you let me know the plans for the 292 on alternative 1 and 3?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll pull out my cheat sheet just so that I am not wrong, but I can tell you that under alternative 1, one of the big changes is that the 292 would stop at the San Mateo County border, meaning that it wouldn't go down into San Francisco anymore. But it would connect there to Muni services. So where we truncate the line, we'd make sure that it's a connection place to Muni and to San Francisco Light Rail. As trade-offs for not going into San Francisco, we would have the route increase in service. So we would split the route into 2 different routes, the 292, which would be remain the northern portion down to Millbrae again. And then there would be a relabeling of the route south of Millbrae to the 293. And the frequency on the northern portion would be every 15 minutes, I believe. So it'd be an increase in service. And then the southern portion would remain the same. Let's see, what else would happen? That is alternative 1. I think I got through that one. Alternative 3, it would extend the route to go to the Millbrae station. It wouldn't split, but it would add Millbrae as a location. And the frequency and hours wouldn't change under that alternative.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. So now we're going to go over to the people with the raised hand. Mr. Hedges, Rich Hedges, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Good presentation. I have a couple of questions. A question about 250 bus and a comment on the 292 bus. So on the 250, I'm having a little trouble because with the maps. It looks like on one of the alternatives that possibly the 250 bus, when it goes to the college, will go up 28th Street. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Also, the 250 bus is the last changes that were made for most of the neighborhoods made it very improved, because I can get on the bus at Norfolk and Fashion Island in 13 minutes. I'm at Caltrain, 12 minutes at downtown, and 12 minutes to Hillsdale. So I was curious about 28th Street. And the reason I am about that, because I know that neighborhood, many in that neighborhood did not want the underpass at 28th Street when it was first promoted, because they didn't want traffic running through their neighborhood. My guess is they're gonna not be as happy with a bus. So if that's gonna happen or an alternative, please let me know. I want to promote myself for all of the complaints, because I'm pretty active in the community on transportation. And the other issue on the 292, I think that's a smart thing. I've taken that bus when there was no other options getting out of the city. And in the past, you haven't been able to pick up passengers in the city, only when you get to the line, except at the transportation center in San Francisco. So it was sort of a lost leader, and it's a milk run. There must be 100 stops between there and close to where I live. So I think it's more of a local bus. That was a very good alternative, I think. So saying that, I'll listen to your answer on the 250 bus and get out of the way. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Richard. I appreciate the comment. So you are correct. The 250 would, under one of the alternatives, utilize 28th Avenue. And the reason for that is to really try to shorten the travel time along the route. And so we'll be ready for some feedback if there is from folks, but the hope there is to just make the travel time.
Just one follow-up. Where does it catch 28th at, Hillsdale or the Alameda?
It's Hillsdale, I believe.
They're going to get flood back. There's
Fair enough.
approximately 5 stop signs, not approximately, I've counted them, between El Camino and the Alameda. So you're going to have the bus stopping and starting, and there are several other on the way up, and then a very steep access to Hillsdale. So drive it before you make the final decision.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rich. So what we'll do, we're going to take Sonia next off mute. Hermes, we're going to go back to a few of the questions in the chat, and then I'll come back to you. So Sonia, you are up next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for taking my call. I live in San Carlos, and we've had terrific success with SamTrans getting our school kids doing several lines specifically to get our school kids down from the hills into our schools, and it's been really great. I wanted to, I heard that you said maybe one of the options was to reduce youth ridership or offerings of riderships to school, and I really wanted to push back on that, and I think it's been so successful. I think youth are our future sustainability champions, and getting them onto transit now, maybe it can be a coordinated effort. I really feel like our youth are on SamTrans interested in riding. They get their parents on, the parents get the neighbors on, the neighbors get the wider community on. So maybe when you have a school system, San Carlos would be so grateful for a line through our hills, a short line through our hills, down to Caltrain and to downtown. Something that, and I send you an email with, there's a 46th line we'd really like to see reinstated. You know, I'm definitely conscientious of equity and making sure that happens, but from a sustainability and interest perspective, San Carlos, we will work really hard to make sure those buses get filled. And then I also wanted to say, one of my main concerns about buses, though, is this, they should never wait behind a car, ever. That at a light, they need to have the queue jumping, you know, where they get to pull to the right, and then the light responds to them, and they get that first opportunity to leave. I think you have some of that technology coming. What I'd like to know is how far away is SamTrans from having that light, queue jumping light priority at every stop on the line? And then secondly, can you do that at stop signs at any stop where a bus route is? Can you make sure that bus never has to wait behind the lines, but rather they use the street parking lane to be able to maybe turn that into a right turn lane where a bus can always go around, and maybe that is the bus stop, so they can be the first ones out. I mean, at a stop, then obviously you have to wait your turn, but how can we make buses not have to wait behind cars? That's my biggest question for efficiency.
Okay, great. So actually, I think I heard 2 different questions in there. The first one was around school service. I think maybe Jonathan, you should say a little bit more on school service. It's really just a few routes, and you know what that's looking for. And I think she was asking about good old-fashioned TSP.
Yeah, I can do both of those. Sonia, thank you for the comments and questions. You know, as far as school service goes, it's not a drastic change. It's on Reimagine, some of the changes that we're proposing, but there's a couple themes that come to mind. So, for example, looking at routes that maybe are at half capacity, that could be combined with a little bit more travel time. So, for example, we have 2 routes, the 16 and 49, that we're seeing both at half capacity. They go very similar places, and they serve the same school. And if we combine them, we would add about 3 minutes of travel time to some of the riders, but that would also free up an entire bus during that time. So those are the trade-offs, examples. And again, if people are curious about individual routes, I can answer those. But again, on the website, there's some of the changes there. TSP, I love it. The bus should go first.
First, I'm going to pause to you, Jonathan, because I use
Yes.
the term. So
I was so excited about
making a joke.
TSP.
Let's explain what TSP is and some of the really cool stuff that we've been working on in that area.
Yeah, for sure. So I was ready. I wasn't going to leave it out there. It's just TSP. So transit signal priority. It is a system. There's a couple different technologies out there, but the goal of transit signal priority is to get the bus to move faster along its route. And by doing so, it utilizes the street lights, the traffic lights to do that. So we have a couple projects that are going on right now, pilot projects, one on the ECR to harness that technology in order for the bus to go quicker along the route. And the way that it works is that the bus essentially communicates with the light. They have a transmitter on the bus, and the light has a receiver, and what the bus will tell the light is, hey, I'm running late, or I'm on time, or oh, I'm running a little bit early and I don't really want to have to sit at that stop for an extra couple minutes. And then the light will hear that and go, okay, you're running late. I'm going to hold this green for you. I'm going to get you through this intersection. Or if you're fine, you're running on time, everything's good, I'm just going to function as normal. And then if you're early, you know, I will change my lights maybe to get some of the other traffic through. So it's really cool, new technology out there, and SamTrans is for sure pursuing it. And the project on the ECR, I think, is going well, and we look forward to expanding it. I couldn't tell you when we'll have it on every single traffic signal, but again, I think it's a great project, and we're definitely actively pursuing it.
All right, I'm going to go back to the chat for the next few questions. Evan Adams says, eliminating Foster City FCX is completely unacceptable. It has been a tremendous success. People love it. You would have to be a seamless train connecting service delivering you to San Francisco faster than FCX, which is impossible given traffic on Hillsdale Boulevard. Jonathan, you want to talk for a second about, you know, the FCX and where it's at?
Well, I mean, I think that we've talked about it. It sounded like a little bit more of a comment than a question, but I appreciate the comment and looking at the Foster City Express. You know, when we're looking at these different alternatives, they're based on themes or things that people would like to see. So doesn't mean that it'll necessarily be eliminated. I think it's only under one alternative that's suggested. But you know, overall, hearing comments that you like the Foster City Express is great. We are seeing some ridership return to it as we conquer the pandemic. So we'll continue to review that. You know, and that's a prime example of one of the things that we're doing right now, and the shifting landscape that we think about is, you know, how are people going to return to work in San Francisco, or is it going to be more remote working, and what makes sense? So we're definitely keeping our eye on it, and I'm glad you're enjoying the Foster City Express, or maybe were before the pandemic, and will again once we beat it.
Yeah, we were real proud of that route, real proud of the ridership on that route. So the next question is from Karen Cucklin. Were the routes coordinated with CCAG shuttles?
Sorry, Jessica, I was coughing at the same time. Did you say was it connected with shuttles?
The coordinated with the CCAG shuttles. And I'm pretty sure that's a yes, right?
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, not necessarily in the scope of Reimagine SamTrans, but in the planning department team, we're also doing a shuttle study, and you know, part of that is making sure that our SamTrans routes connect well with the shuttles, connect well with our partner agencies. So that will be a goal, absolutely, to improve connections.
Great. So I'm going to call out to our Spanish interpreters. We have a Spanish language question. Are one of you able to help us with that and read it out and let us know what it says?
It was just me telling the Spanish participants they can ask their questions in Spanish. But I believe Hermes Monzon might be a Spanish participant. Señor Hermes, ¿usted tiene una pregunta?
Yes, but I can speak in English too. Gracias.
No problem.
Okay. So I can talk.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, please.
Jonathan, it's just a comment. Envision all your plans. I just come to my mind. I visit a couple of cities. Indianapolis, for example, has a Indigo that goes from the airport to downtown. It goes through the major hotels, and that creates a very dynamic way to access to downtown and the airport. And since we are already in the proximity of the SFO airport, I just want to make a comment. It would be great to have something for at least for the cities that's around the airport, have like a shuttle, maybe a partnership with hotel shuttles that exist already. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it just, I'm just thinking as a micro route, shuttle, SFO with the vicinity cities to loop around and see how that goes.
Yeah, great comment. Very familiar with Indigo. And so, I think it's something worth looking at. I think we really try to be conscientious too of how our systems will all work together in the Bay Area, having BART, having Caltrain, and making sure that we complement each other in the areas. But yeah, we actually have a stakeholder meeting with SFO too, so we'll get their comments on Reimagine. And personally, working with their planning team, they're a great group to work with. So great comments, appreciate it.
All right, so Hermes, you got your question. We're gonna go with another raised hand. Sarah, is it Eunice? Did I get that right? Sarah, you can go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, so it's Funes. Yeah, I just had a comment and then a question. So I think it was Sonia who mentioned San Carlos and the kids being able to go to school. That's the only line in my neighborhood in Avalon Park in South San Francisco is to get kids to school. And it's unfortunately no use to me because I'm not a teacher. And I don't work there. I remember years ago, there were multiple buses to and from BART. And I'd really like to get those back because I work in Palo Alto. And transfers to ECR aren't easy if it involves crossing a street, which it does. So I was just wondering, are there any plans to get buses from inside of the neighborhoods in South San Francisco to major transit hubs like San Bruno BART and South San Francisco BART, or no? And then also in Millbrae, I remember a few years ago I took the ECR. Why were the stops moved out of the station to like the street?
The ECR, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the station. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Millbrae. In Millbrae. I took Millbrae and the stop wasn't in the station where it was before. I was wondering why.
Yeah. Well, so for the ECR specifically, and we're actually talking to Millbrae because there are some renovations going on that station. But the ECR in specific is we try to keep on El Camino Real on the corridor to improve its travel time. So it's kind of a trade-off. If we pull into those stations with the ECR, we add travel time, and people really want to go quickly. So I understand. I know that there though are some plans with the Millbrae station to do some improvement on the infrastructure and where the buses are going. So that's in the beginning talks, but you'll see some renovations there. For Avalon Park, familiar with it. You guys are my neighbors. I'm in Daly City, but right there on the corner of South San Francisco and Daly City. We do have the North County meeting, which may be great to go to because we'll cover a lot more South San Francisco on May 19th.
18th, May 18th, May 18th.
May 18th.
May 18th, 5:30 to 6:30.
I got some fake news over my chat here. I have a whole team supporting me. I'm not really this smart. But sorry, May 18th. But you know, if you also wanted to email the Reimagine email, happy to go over some of the choices there. I think there's some changes that can help in that area, and we can talk about trip planning too. So happy to offer that.
Yeah, I mean, I went to this meeting because I have the day off. So
Oh,
I
for
mean,
sure.
there's no guarantee. Yeah, there's no guarantee that I can make that meeting. So I make any meeting I can at this point because I work.
Yeah.
But yeah, like being disabled and having the stops not be in the stations is really difficult when I'm either walking or using a wheelchair. So I was really frustrated when I found out that the bus stop had moved to the street. Like that's great for people who aren't disabled, and also it wouldn't be an issue if paratransit worked, but it doesn't in this county. So I really need stops to be inside BART stations.
I hear you. Well, Sarah, I mean, it sounds like you're definitely a frequent rider. If you shoot us an email, I'm happy to personally talk to you, and we can chat about different options and talk about the paratransit service too. I'm happy to talk to them. So totally recognize that you work, and I'm happy to work around that schedule. But I will personally offer that out that we could chat sometime if that works for you.
All right.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thanks.
I'm going to jump in right now. We have about 5 minutes left on this. I'm going to do a couple of plugs. I'll take the next person, Richa, in just one moment. We'll take you off the chat or off the unmute. But first, if you want to email us, it's reimagine@samtrans.com. That's reimagine@samtrans.com. Super critical. Do please take our survey. We'll take all these comments, plenty of places to take comments. We're not going to get to all the questions in the chat tonight, but we have recorded all of them. They'll all be part of our thinking and our processing on this project. And so I think with that, Risha, we'll let you go off mute to ask our last question. Well, we'll see if it's the last question of the evening. It may be the last question of the evening. But again, take our survey. It is so critical. Tell your friends. This is what we have. We also, if you go to reimaginesamtrans.com, we're doing one of these meetings for each of the regions of the county, South, Mid, North, and Coast. Please attend those. We're going to do a deep dive in each of those. And so with that, Risha, if you could please ask us your question.
All right, thank you. And I am asking this question. I serve as Vice Mayor of Foster City, and I also sit on commute.org board. And I'm asking this question on behalf of the residents of my city and also as a rider. So I used Foster City, it used to call FX way back when. And I used that to go to commute to San Francisco downtown, where I used to work. I still work there, but working from home now. And I remember what we all went through when that service got canceled. And, I had several conversations with, fellow riders and how panicked they were and figuring out other options because, the last mile to that last mile is very critical for Foster City. The traffic to get to Foster City from a BART station or from a Caltrain station is extremely, extremely difficult. So Foster City, FX or FCX, later on when it was reinstated, it was almost like a festival in Foster City. We all were so happy, and I tried it again. It was full for first few weeks when it was evaluated, it was full. And that is our only, public transit option really for so many of us in the city. I'm one of them. Very soon my work will, will open and we'll be working in the office and we'll have to figure out commute options. It's not acceptable to spend 1 hour just from 101 North, 101 South getting to my home in Foster City. The alternatives that are being laid out, I think they don't make any sense. The third one, it takes an hour to get an Uber to Foster City. So on demand, doesn't really make sense. So I would request for a consideration not to eliminate Foster's FCX service. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the comments on the Foster City Express. I definitely like the FCX, and we do as well, all at SamTrans. And we saw the steep decline in ridership during the pandemic, but we also saw the very exciting increased ridership right before. It was just exploding in ridership. So it's really a route that we want to keep. I think that it's in the alternatives, based on different priorities that people have and for a discussion piece, but it's something that I really hope that we keep, and I think that it is important to the residents of Foster City. And so I think we're meeting with the council next week, so that'll be exciting to do another presentation over there, and maybe we can talk more about it. But understood, and I hear you, and I'm really glad that you shared your experience, because that was a really big push to get that route created and up and running, and we look forward to seeing it increase in ridership as we conquer this pandemic. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great. And then just so everyone, clarification, when microtransit, very new concept. We did a pilot out in Pacifica. So when you look at the maps and you see a microtransit zone, the bus will function entirely within that zone, in that area. It won't leave that area. So, if there's a trafficy area near a zone, but it's outside of it, that bus will never get there. It will exist entirely within what you see as the map. And again, it's a regular old bus, it's regular old fare. And so if you see a big pink area that says microtransit, that's the only place that bus will go, is within that microtransit zone. All right, we're over time. There's one more question in the chat that I'm going to ask, and then we'll call it a day. I think it's a good question from Jason Lee. Could you please reroute the 250 bus to serve the new Hillsdale Caltrain station? It is too far to walk to Hillsdale to make a convenient transfer to Caltrain.
So yeah, in the some of the alternatives, we do have that suggested to reroute to the Hillsdale station. And I think that we're looking at just looking at those stops in general, with the Hillsdale just opening again. So understood, appreciate the comment, and it's definitely something that we're looking at, understanding the walk can be a little bit long.
Yeah, so we are looking at that, we hear that. So again, we're going to wrap this up. I've said it 100 times, please take our survey. But if there's a question you asked and we didn't get to it today, please email us at reimagine@samtrans.com, and we will take a look at that question and get back to you. And just actually, there is one little follow-up, because it's on what I was just saying about microtransit. Evan Adams asked, wait, microtransit or on demand? Are you saying on demand will not take you to the Hillsdale train station? It's the same thing. Microtransit, on demand, we're using two words for the same thing. And the Foster City Zone does not include the Hillsdale station. It would just be trips within Foster City.
But it could connect to a bus going to the
Absolutely.
Hillsdale station.
Yes, thank you. Someone has thrown reimagine@samtrans.com into the chat. And again, thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate this, and we are very happy that you're here tonight. Please join us at one of our other meetings. And again, you can email us. We will get back to you with more answers. And with that, I think that we are going to be ending this meeting this evening. Thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.